Good afternoon. Welcome to Disciple Bible Study, Session 4, Covenant. Today as we talk about the concept of covenant, one of the first things I would say to you is that there really isn't a good word that explains in our culture the meaning of covenant in an Old Testament sense. In an Old Testament covenant, it was an agreement between a greater and a lesser power. The greater power would basically come into the smaller nation and explain, okay, I have conquered you, or I certainly can conquer you, and here are the terms. And there are stipulations to the covenant, that certain rules that must be followed. In the case of God with his people, you might think of the Ten Commandments as being the stipulations of the covenant. The greater power would say to the lesser power, there are blessings to you keeping the covenant. I will protect you. I will ward off other nations. I will feed your people in time of famine. Lots of blessings from the greater power if the covenant is kept. If the covenant is not kept, there are curses. And usually that means that the king and his army will come and actually destroy the lesser power. So that is kind of an overview of the Old Testament concept of covenant and how that plays out between God making a covenant with Abraham. You can see that clearly God is the greater power and Abraham is, or we are the lesser power. And there are things that God asks us to do. He asks us to love him more than anything else. So that's the concept of covenant in the Old Testament. Let's talk for a few minutes about how that relates to God having a covenant with Abraham or with us. Clearly God is the greater power and Abraham is, or we are, the lesser power. And God comes to Abraham, God comes to us and says, here are the stipulations. You will put me first. You will love me before all other things. And all of the other 10 commandments basically fall out of putting God first. And if the covenant is kept, then God blesses us and loves us and forgives us and enjoys life with us. And if the covenant is not kept, then we reap the results of that. We sow the seeds of destruction and we reap the harvest of pain. In the Old Testament, there were a lot of enemies that came in and took the people over and different things that would happen. I would probably tell you that in our living, when we choose not to honor God, when we choose not to keep the covenant, we become the people that are separated from God, the people that are lost on the way of life, the people that become to think that life is about having stuff and selfishness and pursuing things that really can't satisfy. So one of the things that I love about the story of Abraham is he was a friend of God, and he didn't have a church home. He didn't have a church building. He didn't have a pastor. He didn't have the Bible. I mean, they didn't have writing back then. But without all of the things that we think we need to have a spiritual relationship with God, Abraham had none of it, but was a friend of God simply because his heart was turned toward our Father. And I don't say that to you suggesting that you shouldn't read the Bible or go to church or have a pastor. I want you to have a pastor, and I would like to be that person, and I want this to be your church home. But it's just amazing to me the power of a heart that is turned toward God. God blesses Abraham and says, "You're blessed to be a blessing." And I would remind you of this, that our relationship with God is not simply for our own benefit, not simply for our own sense of being filled, but as we are touched and blessed and helped, we are called to go reach out and touch and bless and care for others. Also in the concept of covenant, we see this notion that God is with us and He's not letting us go. And through all the problems that Abraham had and all the ways that the Israelites wandered in the desert, God always stood by them. And I want you to think about that for yourself. Because we have been taught so many things growing up about how God only loves the good people and God throws away the bad people. The concept of the covenant reminds us that God is faithful, not just to Abraham, not just to other people, not just to good people, but God is faithful to you. And He stays with you, and He loves you, and He puts His arms around you. When you choose Him, when you choose to become a Christ follower, God embraces you, and He becomes that friend that sticks closer than a brother. So I hope you enjoyed the reading this week. I hope you enjoyed the discussion tonight, and God bless you, my friends.